I can remember vividly the Carrie asking me, Marshall, what are the big four native grasses? And I have no idea what you're talking about. Like, I don't know what big blue stem is. I don't know what Indian grass is. And so I just realized that I still had a ton to learn. And, really, I didn't understand the first thing about profitability in ranching. And it led me to completely, change the way I thought. This is for profit. If you're ever doing any of this for fun, it might be fun, but that doesn't mean it's going to be profitable, right?
Yeah.
So always be able to know at any given time what you have invested in any animal, any stock, any operation you have going on. And if at any time you don't know, you're going down, you're going to be in trouble.
Welcome back to the Wealthy Cowboy Show. Today we've got another interesting guest on. We're going to go through his story in ranching, and he's also involved in something that could be a great opportunity for somebody that's involved in ranching and something kind of new in our industry. So we got Marshall Whorley on. We got a few different topics to cover, but we always start out with background. Where'd you come from? How'd you get to where we are now?
Yeah. I'm from Temple, Texas. My family has been involved in sale barn ownership and ranching since probably the 50s. Growing up, I spent a ton of time with my grandfather who bought and traded sale barns, bought and traded land. We had the sale barn in Lampasas for, I would say probably since the 70s. So growing up as a kid, I spent a lot of time with him at the sale barn, on the ranches, helping other guys, and just developed a love and passion for ranching, for the land, and also for marketing cattle. I thought, when I was a little kid growing up, I didn't want to be a professional athlete. Those guys, like the order buyers and stuff, to me, those are kind of my heroes, those guys that made it in ranching. And so that's what kind of led me to continue to pursue this. And my background.
Yeah. So what, like growing up, that was the environment you were in. But like, when you graduated high school, what was your path? Were you going to go to college and then come back to that? Or did you just go right into working towards that? Or?
Yeah. So when I was 15, my grandfather passed away. And so I really stopped being involved as much as I was with the ranch and with the sale barns. There was always a passion of mine, but I just kind of stepped away from it. I really focused on sports. I was a decent baseball player, and so I spent a lot of time doing that. Had the opportunity to go play baseball in college. After my second arm injury in college, I decided, it's time to. I just didn't have the passion to keep pushing forward in baseball, and so transferred to Texas A&M. I got a degree in animal science from Texas A&M. After that, I had been working off and on for a large seed stock producer in Cameron. After I graduated from A&M, I went to go work for them full time. I was running the feed mixer for them at the time, and I did that for about a year. And I just realized, this is, I don't want to be sitting on a tractor every single day, feeding bulls. And so I applied to the TCU Ranch Management Program, and luckily I got in. And I spent 2016 and 2017 at basically I spent a year at TCU Ranch Management. Huge eye opener to how little that I actually knew about ranching. Mm-hmm. We had the ability we toured ranches through Kansas, Oklahoma, and the different regions of Texas. Kerry Cornelius was running the program at the time, and he was a fantastic teacher, a fantastic leader. After that, I stepped out and I started managing ranches, and I've managed various ranches all across the state of Texas, and hadn't managed any ranches in Oklahoma, but at least some ranches in Oklahoma and run cattle. So I did that for about 8 or 9 years, and I've just recently stepped out of ranch management and moved into more of a sales sector and helping Kateri Carbon.
What were some big differences you saw? Like, a lot of people have that background of their grandpa's ranch or their family ranch or whatever, and maybe sometimes it's run completely differently once you go out and you start seeing the world, like you got to do. What were some differences like from where you grew up there and being on those ranches around Lampasas and stuff to what you learned in TCU, what you saw in Milam, and then getting to manage other places? Like, was it completely different for you?
Absolutely. It was completely different. We were very, very conventional, very old school growing up. And after going through TCU, I realized how little I knew about range management. I can remember vividly Carrie asking me, Marshall, what are the big four native grasses? And I have no idea what you're talking about. Like, I don't know what big blue stem is. I don't know what Indian grass is. And so I just realized that I still had a ton to learn. And, really, I didn't understand the first thing about profitability in ranching. And it led me to completely, change the way I thought. Granted, with all that being said, there was a lot of valuable things that the old timers do. And I go back, the more I learn about this, the more I think, well, a lot of stuff they were doing was correct. We may not have been the greatest range managers, but when it comes to marketing and when it comes to other things, those guys had it figured out. So now I'm trying to kind of blend those two ideas together.
Yeah. And when you went to TCU, was your plan to be a ranch manager, like hire yourself out, or did you have eventually your own
I've always wanted to have my own operation. That's always been my goal. I always wanted to get back home. There was not a place for me when I graduated, and I'm honestly blessed that that's the way it happened, because I feel like getting to go out to various places and learn, your network expands exponentially, if you leave home. Mm-hmm. Also just learning different there. Every region you go to, people do things differently. So the ability to take what you like from each area you've been and kind of mold it together to something that works for you, and not just be forced into a box of this is what we've always done. I think that it was a huge beneficial, step for me.
Yeah. I think that's huge. I mean, we kind of talked a little bit about that. Like, you were asking me about my background before, and I think that was huge for me. And I still enjoy going new places. I like going the old places that are fun and everything, but that's like a huge, I see it so much as an opportunity to go somewhere new. Somebody calls me to go work a set of cows, just day working, and it's going to be around new people in a new place. And I'm like, man, it's a new opportunity to either meet somebody that could change your life, or become best friends with, or, anything. You could always meet somebody that'll change your life there, or just seeing how they operate, whether it's good or bad. And then you can take that, like you said, and put it in your own operation, or be like, that doesn't work, or maybe that doesn't work over there, but it might work over here. Seeing all that different stuff is
absolutely
a huge opportunity.
Yeah, and the ability to meet different folks. And usually what I've found is most people in agriculture are extremely helpful. If you go in and ask questions, and try to learn, they're always willing to help. Mm-hmm. And that's one thing that I really love about this industry, and even more on the, more of this regenerative side of ranching. Everybody's willing to lend out a helping hand, and it's hard. I've made tons of mistakes in ranching, right? And to have the ability to have the network to call people and ask, what were you doing in this situation or this situation is hugely beneficial.
Yeah. Walk us through kind of like where you went after you got out of TCU. Like, what were your different management roles?
Yeah, I managed a ranch. We had properties in Hamilton County, in Gustine, well, actually Hamilton and Comanche, and we also had another property in Brady. It was pecans, cow-calf operation, and then we also ran stockers under irrigated wheat out in Brady. And so I did that for a few years. After that, I had an opportunity to go to Milam County and manage debought livestock. It was a wild ride. We had, I think, 14 different ranches leased in 3 different counties. And so it was 7 days a week, all day, every day. We ran 5,000 mother cows.
Were you just there at Cameron on that river bottom, or were you all over?
I was all over I was in charge of everything. And obviously Keith, the guy that owned it, he played a big role in it. He and I met every single morning at 7:00, and we went over everything. Keith was he was a tremendous mentor to me. He really started to show me the way kind of money works. And I understood why he was doing the things he did. although it may have been totally different than what I was taught at TCU. You know, he was a big time trader. Mm-hmm. We got cattle in and out every single day.
Yeah, I'd bought some heifers from down there.
Oh, really? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, we calved. When I was there, we were calving about 1,000 heifers every year. We had the Alcoa mine property leased, and that was a wild ride in itself. Basically just one big 5,000 acre pasture with no interior fencing. And
you know, that's
1,400 Brahman cross cows turned out
with a helicopter.
We gathered it with a helicopter. Yeah. So that was a tremendous learning experience. Made lots of mistakes and would have done it differently if I had the opportunity now, but that place was truly amazing. You know, when we got to lease that property, you know, there was switchgrass and big blue stem, and it was just the way that they reclaimed that place. They did a fantastic job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd heard stories about that. I was like, they talked about Diebold, and I was like, I've been there. It's a big open river bottom. What are you talking about? A helicopter? I didn't realize that there was that other place. And it's because it's so uncommon to hear somebody using a helicopter over there in that part of the world.
Yeah, those are pretty waspy cows. And really, what we learned is after we did it about 3 or 4 times, the cattle got sour to it, and so there was always a rodeo at the end, you know, trying to gather everything.
Yeah. Or what about after that? Where'd you go?
After that, I went and managed a ranch in Bosque County. I've always been really into wildlife management as well. I think that everything works holistically, whether we're trying to manage for cattle, sheep, goats, wildlife. I think everything goes together, right? Mm-hmm. So I had an opportunity to manage a ranch whose the landowner's vision was shared with mine, and he wanted to expand, buy some other ranches, and grow his operation. And so I was there for 4 years managing his operation. That's where, you know, everything kind of slowed down a little bit for me. We weren't running 5,000 mother cows. And so it gave me the opportunity to really start reading and try to expand my knowledge base on farming and ranching. That's where I really started to kind of step down, if you want to call it the regenerative kind of trail. We were spending lots of money on fertilizer, spending lots of money on different inputs, and we weren't profitable. Granted, it wasn't the goal of that operation to be profitable, but anything I do in life, I always try to put a dollar figure to it, right?
Yeah.
And it ultimately drove me nuts because no matter what we were doing, we had the fanciest genetics, everything, you know, to the nine, but we weren't profitable. And so I started reading about different ways to do things. And honestly, I was going back to everything. Once I had the opportunity to slow down a little bit, I started thinking about everything that we were doing on some of the ranches that I'd been on. Some of the more conventional things we were doing, whether that was, you know, using a bunch of herbicides, fertilizer, you know, all the money that went into plowing, all of those things. And I started to put a figure to it, and I was like, I don't know if this is necessary. And so I had the opportunity at that ranch to start kind of more or less experimenting with things. So I became, well, that's actually not true. I went to high school with Jake McNamara. He and I have always been big buddies, but he manages the Dixon Water Foundation in Decatur. And so I started calling him and asking him questions. Well, the Dixon Water Foundation is a holistically managed ranch. It's been that way since Alan Savory came over here in the 80s. And the way they have that place set up, that place is about 5,000 acres, and they have it set up into 100-acre paddocks with the water in the middle, and it's all split up with single-strand polywire. And when I went out there and I saw the amount of forage he was growing comparative to what we were growing here in Bosque County, my jaw dropped. And I was like, so you're telling me you're not fertilizing any of this? You're not doing A, B, C, D, E, you know, the things that you're supposed to do? No, yeah. Marshall, we're not doing it. And he put the books out and said, this is profitable. And so he really helped me kind of start to change my mind. And then once that started, it was a rabbit hole that, you know, I still really hadn't come out of. You know, I think I reached the peak where I was doing some crazy grazing management stuff that, you know, the reward wasn't necessarily worth it. But I think any time in agriculture when we can expand what we, you know, the land values in Central Texas are astronomical, right? And so I look at this and I think if I'm trying to make a living doing this, if I can double the size of my operation and not have to add acres, why does that not make sense? If I can do that and decrease all my inputs, does that not make sense? And so that's what kind of led me down, this path of trying to figure out how to have my cattle perform at a certain level, but also have my forages perform at that level with very little input costs.
Mm-hmm. How does that start? Like, are you starting with the thought of how can I get more forage, more grass to grow? Or are you starting with like the idea of like, how can I put more cattle or more animals on here? Or how can I run something that makes more money? Like, is there, you start with one of those and then try to work?
You just start slow. Let's say you had whatever, 4 1,000 acre pastures. Start slow, divide those in half. And then slowly, as you add water infrastructure, continue to divide your pastures. And ultimately what you'll see is you'll finally allow, I would say 99% of the ranches I've been on throughout the state of Texas, they're the grass species are not allowed to recover. If you have continuous grazing all the time, you're never allowing your decreaser species to be able to express themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the places we go in Central Texas, we have very little warm season perennial grasses. And that's just because they've been grazed out. Well, those warm season perennial grasses, those are the ones that are going to be your big forage producers, right? So if we start to allow proper, rest and recovery periods, you will start to increase the tonnage of forage on your properties.
And then let's go back to, we'll get into how all this evolves, but like go back, you got to experiment, you got into that and you were experiment working for somebody else. And then how did that work there? And then did you go after that job? Were you out on your own or?
No, after that job, I went and worked for a large ranch outside of Wichita Falls. It was one of the largest regeneratively managed ranches in the state of Texas. And we were moving cattle moving thousands of stockers 6 times a day. And that really opened.
Was that the bird?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And that opened my eyes into the fact that, number one, I don't want to be moving water every day. But number two, managing thousands of cattle together in a mob is not as unrealistic as you might think. A lot of those times I was out there with me and one border collie and we got it all done. It was it's very time consuming and a lot of work, but it's doable. So, it just opened my eyes to this is not voodoo we're talking about here. This is we can achieve it, to what level you want to get into that's really up to you. Like I said, the moving the water every day to me was a little bit more work than probably I thought was worth it, but it's definitely not voodoo. And if you're able to double your stocking rates, that's huge. Double your stocking rates and you're not adding any extra labor. That's huge when it comes to profitability at the end of the day.
Dax Trailer Sales is based out of Lubbock, Texas, and it's definitely not just a trailer dealership. If you are involved in the Western way of life, and if you're listening to this show, you probably are, they have something you need. From trailers for a day working cowboy to a full-time cattle hauler to hay trailers for a farmer or rancher to arena drags, rope and chutes, and feeders for the rodeo cowboy or cowgirl. They also deal in every kind of hay any of your animals could ever need. Literally anything you need for farming, ranching, or rodeoing, they have something for you. And it's going to be at a super affordable price. Besides all that, everyone you deal with there is super friendly and helpful. We just got new custom flatbeds built for our pickups, and I also got probably the coolest trailer you've ever seen built. And you can stay tuned for a video we're going to do, and it's going to show all of that and some more of their products also. So check out Dax Trailer Sales on Facebook or daxtrailers.com. It's noble, I guess, to think about, restoring the land back to natural, or like really taking care of your land. And like, you're really talking about generations and stuff when you get to thinking about that, which we don't always have the luxury of because, everything's so cut up now. You're talking about a lot of lease country that you're just going to have for a year or 2 years or something like that. So we really don't think about the land. But what's interesting to me is just profitability, how you can, and any of these things that to me, it seems like it's hard. I think to a lot of people, it seems like it's hard to be profitable in ranching and farming and just in agriculture in general and horses, all these things. That's why I like having people on like that to like, how are you making it profitable? Because I've played in all these different areas and sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down. So, yeah, that's super interesting to me of making something more profitable.
Well, I'll say to that, growing up, everybody told me, do not get involved in ranching. You'll never make any money, right? So, and that more or less is probably true for the average producer. It's a break-even business for the most producers. So I don't want to compete with the average producer.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be the weirdo. I want to be the guy you're like, what in the world is that guy doing? But I have to separate myself from everybody else in order to, bring in profitability. A lot of times with our ranchers or our landowners in Central Texas, exactly what you're talking about. I can think of the places that I have leased. Every single one of them, they have properties around them that have no idea about agriculture. And so what I try to do when I try to lease land is go to that landowner and figure out, okay, what do you want out of this, right? I just leased a place here recently. They're big time wildlife people, and they really just want us to go in there and kind of clean up the brush for a few months and get out. Well, I'm allowing them to achieve what they want out of that, and I'm getting extra grazing land out of that.
Mm-hmm.
There's another property that I leased. The landowners were tired of losing money in basically a typical cow-calf business. So if I'm able to go and lease that property, pay them a reasonable lease cost, and improve their property, they're happier than they were prior. So I think it's just a mindset switch of what we need to do in this area of Texas that is being continuously divided.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just like you said, you're able to go in. I mean, you're leasing places and stuff. So now you're out on your own. You're not in a legacy ranch or working for a rich guy that doesn't care if it makes money or something. How has that been out on your own? And how did you get started on your own? Like, what was your first?
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking the best way to answer. I had a friend who they were once the market started to get a little bit higher, they were tired of it and they wanted out of the business. And I just took a big gamble and it worked. And it's been a fantastic opportunity. We know when I first started that deal, I didn't have any money. So we took in some stockers on the gain. We kept those for a few months, made a little bit of money, enough money to go in and take another loan. After that, we bought some Packer cows, and the Packer cow deal has worked. And basically, anytime I feel like I can buy some cattle that I can upgrade, that's really my big deal. I bought some really thin cows, upgraded them, and granted, the market has worked with us fantastically. But we've been able to do that, and then I've also got some custom cows that I'm grazing on that property. So I try to diversify. I'm willing to invest a little bit of money in it, but also having some custom cattle where I know I have cash flow coming in on that place.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we've got going on that place. And the other ranches, mostly we run sheep and goats on those. And that's just due to the country. And it's also due to what we're trying to achieve with that country. A lot of that country was overgrazed, and it's been continuously grazed for 100 years. And so what we're fighting is brush encroachment. I really don't want to graze a lot of my grass. I want to let that grass rest, but I can't afford I pay the leases, right? I can't afford not to have animals out there. So we've got about in Mills County, we've got quite a few nannies and a handful of sheep turned out there, and we're just slowly, kind of rotating through as those pastures recover.
Yeah, I think it's cool to go through Mills County and that area, just because you can see those places that have had goats or sheep and goats on there, for years and years and years, and it's oak trees and no brush usually, and the trees are all grazed up where you can see underneath them, and a lot of good grass on those places and stuff. And that's what a lot of people don't want to mess with sheep and goats, but that's like when I got into it, it's like, do I want to be profitable and be an owner, or do I want to, be a cowboy that only works cows? And so we got in the sheep and goats, and I think it's awesome to what the money that's there compared to cattle, to most cattle operations, and then also what they can do to a place. I mean, sheep are a little different, I think. I mean, you could graze a place into the dirt with sheep, but they also, help control some of your weeds. But the goats, for sure. I mean, all that underbrush, your cedar trees, all that type of stuff, what it cleans up.
Yeah, and that's what most of the landowners there are wanting. They want to keep that kind of rolling savanna landscape out there. And then how do we do that is we do that by having some aspect of sheep and goats in that operation. Obviously the goal is to bring some cattle back on those ranches, but we're not there yet. And also with that said, the sheep and the goats, you got to know what you're doing when you're getting into that, right? And so I brought on a partner, Carl Whitworth, who's been extremely helpful to us getting going on the financial side, and also with the knowledge that he has. He has about 6,000 nannies turned out on the Noble Research Foundation in Oklahoma. So he and I are partners on all the goats down here in Central Texas.
Yeah. And what have you seen? Probably growing up, y'all had some sheep and goats around there, huh? I mean, And then what have you seen managing that? What's the difference in adding that back into the operation?
It's been a lot of fun. Growing up, we had to deworm those goats every 2 to 3 months because everything was set stock, and it was a hassle. Not saying that we've completely gotten away from deworming as a whole, but as you're rotating those goats, the parasite issues are less and less. And what we've also done is put together all of the herds. So we're running 1,200 nannies in one bunch right now. And on top of that, we're running 10 livestock guardian dogs. So I feel like the predator pressure has actually decreased and the deworming has decreased. So the overall labor of it has decreased. Mm-hmm. We're not there yet. The biggest issue we have, I feel like right now is, the billies were left on those goats, a lot of those goats year round. So obviously doing any sort of rotation with sheep and goats when they're still having their kids is extremely difficult.
Yeah. So
what we've done is we try to put them in smaller break them up and put them in smaller traps to let them kid. So everything will pair up. And then once everybody kind of gets up and gets going, then we'll start to rotate. And so it's not a perfect system, but if we're forcing those goats to rotate all the time, if you're losing 50% of your kid crop because they're leaving kids behind, that's your profitability right there. Mm-hmm. So we've tried to kind of blend those two ideas together to really let them kid, settle down, and then we'll start to move them as those kids get up and get stronger.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like anything. It's not like black and white. We're going to implement this system when we're going to do that. And then, like you said, it ends up not working for that particular deal, but you're working towards it all the time. Maybe one day it'll be perfect like that.
I think we'll get there. It's just going to take time to get the breeding season cycled up right.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and that's how mine are. We just leave the billies out, and I always say I'm like a farmer with the goats. When I see a bunch of big ones out there, we go gather them up and knock the big ones off, haul them to the cell, and pour some wormer on them, and usually good to go. Pretty low maintenance as long as they're not. Every once in a while, we have one that gets prone to sticking its head through the fence, or when we have a bunch of little kids running around, they might end up no telling where on the side of the road or whatever.
Yeah. No, for sure. And a goat is a goat. They can have all the forage in the world and they're still going to figure out something to get in trouble with.
Mm-hmm. Have you had to work on a lot of infrastructure, putting those sheep and goats in, as far as fencing and all that?
Not on those Mills County properties, no. And that's been kind of the blessing of Mills County is that sheep and goat country. Mm-hmm. There's either 9-strand barbed wire or net wire, on most all those properties. So it just made sense to go, to start out with sheep. Most people start out with cattle, right? And then they try to implement sheep and goats later. Mm-hmm. We're kind of doing it backwards, but it's because we already have that infrastructure.
Yeah. And as far as rotating, what have you done to implement that? Have you been putting up any hot wire or building new fence, or how's that working?
Just depends on the place. I usually don't fool with the goats and hot wire. I've done it. You can do it. We've run them behind 4 strands of hot wire, but pulling out 4 strands of hot wire is a lot of work. Mm-hmm. Especially the soil's so rocky up there. Putting in step-in post is hard. On the place we have in Bell County, we do a lot of single strand hot wire. So I'll section those cattle out and have them moving. Depending on how often I can get there, they'll either do daily moves up to weekly moves behind 1 strand of polywire. And the crazy thing that people don't realize is, a lot like these packer cows, when you get them in there coming out of sale barn, high-headed, crazy, training those cattle to hot wire allows you to do so much more with a cattle with so much less help. I mean, I can pretty much take those cattle wherever I want. I just build a lane, take them straight to the pens. There's no hoorah, cowboy, the whole thing. It's just, me, one border collie, and some polywire. We can pretty much get them where we need to go with them.
Mm-hmm. What does that look like? Like what does breaking them to that hot wire look like?
The way I do it is I just put them initially in a trap, and I'll have water on one side and I'll have their feet on the other side. And I have maybe like a 10-foot gap that they have to walk through to go get feed and to go get water. They get trained to it pretty well. 5 to 7 days, they're ready to rock and roll, and they won't mess with it after that.
Mm-hmm. And are you are you gathering them just with the feed pickup in the border collie? Are you a horseback or?
No, usually we'll just build the lane and kind of whistle at them, and they know they get trained to move. So we'll set up the rotations to whenever I need to work them,
mm-hmm.
they'll be into the pasture right next to the pens. So then it's just set up a lane and you're going into the pens.
Okay.
There's a lot, it makes everything a lot more simple, when the cattle are trained to hot wire.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's just, nobody thinks of training cattle the same as you'd train a dog or a horse or something, but it's the same thing, especially like we were talking about earlier, like day working. You get to see so much stuff, and you can see a huge difference in somebody that is in their cattle all the time, whether it's a yearling or a cow, an Angus cow or a Bremer cow, whatever. If you're rotating them, moving them, or somebody rides through there, a horseback or whatever. I mean, we're doing mainly everything horseback, but you're training those cattle to where when it comes time to work them, it's no big deal. You go get around them, push them up. Even training them to dogs, anything. I mean, you're training them, and it's so much easier, but you can tell the places we go, and nobody's been out there. Nobody's even been outside out there afoot outside the feed truck or whatever it is, or maybe they hadn't fed at all, and you got to go gather them, and it's like you got to hire more help. You got to use more infrastructure, whether you're having to rope stuff and drag it in a trailer or, have to go hunt it and find it and use dogs and all this type of stuff.
Right. And that cuts into profitability big time. That's adding stress on the cattle, and stockmanship is huge.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm definitely not the best there is, but that's something that I've noticed is, that's we grow up doing this. You just want a cowboy and hoorah, but the stockmanship aspect of it is extremely important, and we don't talk about that very often.
Yeah. I saw a difference in my operation. I had a pretty decent sized place leased, and it was like super brushy. Well, when I got it, I'd usually go about once a week and feed. And so they were really trained to come to the truck. And when we were going to work them, I had a big trap there. So I'd usually just trap, and then we'd go with the dogs and everything and hunt the stuff that we didn't call in, whatever handful it was. Well, when I went to gather off that place, I'd quit. I was like, this is cost. It was a long ways down there, and feed's high. And I was like, screw this. I'm going to make them work. I'm not going to feed them. I would just go every once in a while, maybe put out a bag of cubes or something. Well, I got less broke to the truck. So when we went to gather that place, I didn't call as many in. So we had to ride it more. And so I didn't keep good enough books to weigh which one, costs less. But definitely, I mean, it's going to probably somewhat even out, whether you're going and either riding through them all the time where they're gentle, or feeding them all the time where you can cake them wherever you want, or you just put all your labor in at one time when you're going to work them. I don't know. Superior Steel Sales is based out of Carthage, Missouri, but they ship pipe and fencing supplies and livestock equipment across the U.S. Like many of the businesses we talk about on here, the owner, Matt Bell, started out specializing in building pipe fence and livestock pens, and saw an opportunity to supply ranchers and contractors all across the country with quality livestock equipment, fencing, and corral supplies. They carry a full line of pipe fence, corral materials, as well as their own line of livestock equipment. Superior Standard. No matter where you are in the country, if you're in the ranching and livestock business, you need to check them out. They probably have something for your operation and a growing dealer network across the country. And of course, like most of the companies I tell you all about, you're going to be dealing with great people that'll take great care of you. Check out their website at superiorsteelsales.com or their Facebook, Superior Steel Sales.
Well, that's kind of the beauty of rotational grazing is you're cutting down on your feed costs as well. So, and what you're talking about, those Brahman cattle, the ones that are usually running off all the time, what you'll notice are those are the ones they've got it figured out. As soon as they see you coming, they'll perk up and say, oh, it's time to go to new grass. And so really they become the ones that you cuss, they become the herd leaders when you're actually in a rotation. It's bizarre to see, but that's really the way that it works. And so the reason I do all the grazing stuff is because I can manage the feed. I know how much feed is out there in front of me. I'm always taking inventories of that feed, so I know, okay, I need to sell right now, or I can continue this on for however much longer I need to go with those cattle. So it's just, that's really one of the reasons that led me into all this, is being able to manage the stock. Because growing up, it was always, oh, it's dry, it's this, it's that, and I can't control that.
Yeah,
but I can control how much forage is out in front of me.
Yeah,
and that can decrease your feed costs. If you can, instead of having to feed hay, you can just stockpile grass. That's a huge cost savings.
Yeah, rotating, like I've never really been on a rotation system with cattle, but around the house it's pretty cut up, and we move those sheep and goats. And it is cool to see, which they're different to gather than cattle. I mean, I always say they're pretty easy because they anytime you get after them, they ball up, and then getting them to drive somewhere. But it's cool once you show them a new gate. You're screwed if you got to drive them through a new pasture to get somewhere else, because you show them a new gate, like you said, new grass, and then they see that, and those goats will run through there and then just go to eating that fresh grass. And it's pretty cool to see that. And I would assume it'd be the same once you get your cattle broke like that.
Oh yeah, the cattle definitely get broke to it. They want to move. Cattle have the ability to sense. Yeah, they want to be with that fresh growth, and they do better, honestly, going to fresh growth. Now, that's a whole different box of worms we can get into of knowing how to manage your grass, and it's more complicated than what you might think of. You don't want to have your grass go rank on you, but it's definitely a balancing act that it's a constant learning curve.
Yeah.
I've got friends that have gotten big time into this and cut their places up into hundreds of paddocks and made some pretty big mistakes. But it's all about knowing how to judge your cattle and judge your forage and know when you need to be grazing certain areas at certain times. And it is truly an art.
And kind of staying on that topic before we switch, what are some resources? Was it a lot of mentorship, or are there courses out there, books and videos and programs and stuff? Or
there absolutely is. I'm a big fan of Ranching for Profit. They talk about grazing management, financial, and just the amount of resources that you pick up from those classes, just the Rolodex of people that you meet that are extremely intelligent and are out there truly trying to turn a profit, trying to do better than what they were doing prior. That's been a huge benefit for me. Soil Health Academy is a great class to attend, and I don't care if you're conventional or not. Going to those two classes to me is worth it, because anything in life, you need to hear both sides of the story. If as soon as you go down and you're saying, I'm only going to do this, you're going to fail. You need to hear out both sides of the story. And I feel like that's what I've noticed a lot kind of in this journey is I grew up very conventionally, right? And then I turned around and I got really involved in the regenerative agriculture stuff. Don't discount what those guys at the sale barn are doing. They have marketing figured out, and that's extremely, extremely important. But also on the flip side, your grass management is also equally important. So how do we push those two together? I think being able to successfully do both of those is how you become profitable at ranch management.
Yeah, that's what drives me crazy is everybody wants to butt heads. They're this way's right, this way's right. And it's like in any part of life, most of the time it's a blend. Like I said, it's not always black and white. Like a lot of times we need to meet in the middle, take good things out of here, take good things out of here, and implement them. And then also in agriculture, like our country's so diverse. Even in one county, one side of the county needs to operate different than the other side, especially once we get into Texas or the whole rest of the country. But that's a big thing. It seems to me like, and I had an agronomy professor in Tarleton. I remember this is one of the things that stuck with me. He said, if you're a rancher, you're not growing beef or whatever it is you're growing, the animal that you have, you're a grass farmer ultimately. So we lose track of that, but just going through the pains of starting out, you got to have some cash flow and some profitability coming in. And usually you're not thinking of the long term. Like I said, that can also be limited to whatever grass you have. Maybe you have a lease place where you're not going to have it long term. But I think there's something to blend right there. Can we do like it seems like the regenerative guys, they want to say, we need to grow grass, we need to cut the fences up, do all this stuff. But they don't take into account, like, is that profitable at the end of the day? Is it going to be, can we make that even work? Probably would. Like if we learned a lot about grass and all that stuff in rotational grazing, and then got given a place that was already had the infrastructure in place, you're probably going to, succeed at that. But how can we start from nothing and then kind of start implementing that while also maintaining cash flow and profitability through there?
Right. And I think that's just being slow about making big changes, right? If you've leased a place, like I said earlier, just slowly start to develop it. You don't bite off more than you can chew initially. But these are ranching for profit principles. It's decreasing your overhead, your turnover, and your gross margin. So why don't you start out with something that has a high turnover and a higher gross margin? Really learn how to straighten out some peewee yearlings, get you some cash flow running, custom graze cattle, do something different where you're not taking a massive risk up front. I don't try to compete with the big guys. If you're wanting to run fancy, tiger stripe cows, I'm not going to be able to play that game. I don't have the money to play that game. Mm-hmm. And so I'm just trying to upgrade something and get some cash flow generated and to kind of make improvements as we go.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that everybody sees that and they say, man, I want to be the guy that's on the front of the Cattleman magazine, Southwestern Texas Cattle Raisers magazine. That's a different game than you and I are playing, right?
Yeah.
And I think that we just have to be aware of that when we're starting out.
Yeah. It seems like the opportunity, I think a lot of my audience is like going to be on the starting side of things or wanting to get started. And what I see there is in most things, it seems to me like you either got time or money. So starting out, you usually don't have any money, but you probably have some time to invest in there, which time is going to equal labor in this equation. So what can you do? And like you said, you get some high risk cattle, some high risk yearlings or little calves or something to turn out and take care of. And maybe that is doing it for somebody else and you're just the labor of doctoring them. Maybe you're just taking care of some cows or something. You're out there putting the labor in, taking care of them, feeding them, rotating them, whatever you're doing. Anything like that where you're going to put time in. Not on the other side of the equation, if you're somebody that's got a really good town job and you just want to be involved in ranching and you want to invest your money somewhere, then you have the money and then you're going to partner up with somebody that has the time, or you're going to pay somebody for their time. So there's two sides, but it seems like there's always a way to get started if you
think outside the box.
Yeah, and you try. You just get creative about it, and you're passionate about it. The same way with me getting started in this or in my businesses or anything like that. Like it's just, you got to get creative, and how can you kind of make it and build it. And one thing I see is like, you got to keep reinvesting. Like you're not going to get rich quick. You got to keep growing it before you can just survive long enough to where you do get some breaks to where it's a little bit more comfortable.
Absolutely.
And so I want to move on to
Yeah.
Your other
one
job.
other thing I would
Yeah.
like to say is if getting started, know your numbers. I mean, this is for profit. If you're ever doing any of this for fun, it might be fun, but that doesn't mean it's going to be profitable, right?
Yeah.
So always be able to know at any given time what you have invested in any animal, any stock, any operation you have going on. And if at any time you don't know, you're going down, you're going to be in trouble.
Yeah.
And I just think that's really important for people starting out. Know your costs.
If you didn't hear Ben Hale's story on episode 69, you need to check it out. He's been earning trust in the cattle industry one handshake at a time since 1995 at Western Livestock. Western Livestock is proud to be family owned and operated now with 5 locations: Oklahoma City, Woodward, Comanche, and Waurika, Oklahoma, and also Knoxville, Iowa. They're proud to do business the Western way with honesty, integrity, and a handshake that still means something. You can join them ringside or stream their sales from wherever you are. Western Livestock, where a handshake is their word, cattle are money, and timing is everything. If you're looking to buy or sell, contact Ben Hale at 940-631-BEEF. That's 940-631-2333. Check them out on Facebook or westernlivestock.com. And I think it's hard for all of us to unite, like people in agriculture, because everybody's in it for different reasons. Like I said, there's guys that just love it, you know, that want to be in it and have their own ranch and all this, but they need it to work for profit. And then you got guys with money and they just want to show place and to look at it all and all that. They probably want it to lose money. So it's hard for those people to get together and like unite and actually get some policy changes and, you know, whatever we're going to do to make the industry better, because it's so diverse. But it's also cool to see both sides.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So moving on to tell me about what else you have going on.
So I'm a regional sales manager for Kateri Carbon. What we do is we partner with landowners to essentially broker your carbon credits. Kateri was founded by a guy named Ben Varese, who was previously the COO of Vince. And through his time at Vince, he saw, a vast amount of rangeland that people were actually using virtual fencing collars to manage their grazing, right? And he saw a big opportunity to actually start selling carbon credits off of those ranches. And so that's kind of where we started Kateri. What we could do at Kateri, like I said, we partner with landowners to broker your carbon credits. We pay for a one-on-one ranch advisor, and we work with Jeff Goodwin out of Texas A&M. We work with Kurt Gadzia. We work with umpteen different ranch advisors. We pay for all the soil testing, and then we do all the validation and verification of your carbon credits. We take care of all those costs. Lastly, we will pay to either put GPS tracking tags on your cattle or pay for virtual fencing. So all that is considerably, a huge expense, but we'll pay for that up front in return to be able to broker your carbon credits. We take a 70-30 split. You, as the rancher, receive 70% of the profit of the program. We receive 30% of the profit. And so we talked about earlier getting into rotating your cattle and the infrastructure. We will pay for the infrastructure to get you started. And that is the biggest thing when you go to these larger ranches. Water's always an issue. Fencing's always an issue. So to be able to partner, with a privately funded project to be able to put in that infrastructure, not only just put the infrastructure in, but also pay you to have these practices going on is, to me, extremely enticing for the rancher.
Mm-hmm. And kind of go more in depth with that, like what is a carbon credit for one, and then who qualifies for it?
So a carbon credit is 1 metric ton of carbon in your soil. And the way we measure that is we take meter deep soil cores. You burn it down, and what's left over is the carbon that's in your soil. So 1 metric ton of carbon today is worth about $25 to $40, depending on other sorts of, diversity credits that we can put on top of that. So let's say your average Central Texas landowner, that he has a potential of bringing in, and after the project's paid for, an extra $10 to $15 an acre per year.
Yeah, I mean, and that's some places that's like basically lease,
Exactly.
a whole lease right there.
Exactly.
And does it have to be like a bigger place to make it worth it?
For right now, yeah. I mean, I would say our smallest ranch is probably 1,000 acres. It's relative to your rainfall. Your carbon sequestration is not, it's not all about rainfall, but a lot of it is rainfall. You know, areas that have higher amounts of rainfall, they are going to sequester more carbon.
And it has to do with the amount of forage there, right? Is that kind of how it works?
Yes. The amount of forage, the amount of decrease or C4 species, and your ability to keep those species vegetative for a longer period of time. So people have the misconception is, well, we'll just pull all the cattle off. Well, if you do that, your grasses are going to become reproductive quicker than if you were grazing livestock. So that's why we use amp grazing, which that's just a term for, pretty just rotational grazing, more or less.
Mm-hmm.
What our goal is to try to keep those grass plants vegetative for as long as we can. The longer those grass plants are vegetative, the longer they're in photosynthesis, the more carbon that they're pumping into the ground.
Yeah. That's it's pretty interesting. What part of the world are y'all operating mainly in?
We're all over the United States. We started out of Montana. We have quite a few big ranches in the Northwest. Kind of came down through Colorado, and the reason I got hooked up with Kateri is they wanted to start, kind of an operation in Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas, and they were looking for somebody that kind of knew the landscape of Texas. So yeah, it would be really anywhere in the United States if they're larger ranches.
Mm-hmm. And talk a little bit about that, about how you got started, how that opportunity came about.
I'd been researching carbon credits, so probably for the last 4 or 5 years, and I was always a little bit skeptical, but this is the Wealthy Cowboy show, and profit is pretty important. And I understood from ranch management, sometimes you can do everything right and you're still not profitable. And so I was always searching for something. When I started TCU Ranch Management Program, they had a picture and said, what is the best mineral program in the state of Texas? And it was an oil well behind a longhorn cow. So I feel like carbon credits are really no different than wind energy or solar. It's a way for you to increase the revenue per acre on your property. But with carbon credits, you don't have to look at an ugly windmill or look at an ugly solar farm.
Mm-hmm.
We're essentially paying you for the work that you would already be doing.
Yeah. And is this, I mean, basically you're just selling these credits to large companies, and you're wanting to basically improve a ranch, right?
Yes. Our goal is always to increase your stocking rate, right? Increase that biodiversity on that place. Who buys these credits is mostly multinational companies. This is mandatory in the UN. It's mandatory in Australia. And in the United States of America, it's all voluntary. But most of these credits are sold to large energy companies and large technology companies. Kateri, we're backed by the single largest carbon buyer in the world, and it is an energy company. That's basically that's how we got the funding to start this project.
Mm-hmm. Is there an opportunity to partner with y'all on the sales side, work for your company in any capacity? If somebody was looking for opportunity to look for a career or job?
Yes, sir. Yeah, we're growing. And then we also take referrals. If somebody, we have a scale based upon, the amount of acres you refer into the program that we'll give you kickbacks on. So we work with consultants all over the United States.
Mm-hmm. Where can people learn more about that stuff?
We have a website. It's www.katericarbon.com. We go in depth. There's blogs on different styles of grazing management. It goes in depth into the carbon industry, and then, yeah, that's where most of our information is. We also have a Facebook site Facebook account as well.
Is it? Do y'all deal with a lot of ranches that don't have? It's just say it's under just one fence. They have no they have nothing in place, and you just help them put that in place.
That's the vast majority of the ranches that we actually work with. We have two different programs. We have one program that is more front loaded on infrastructure. So let's say you had 20,000 acres and you had absolutely zero water infrastructure. We'll pay for all your water infrastructure up front. We'll help pay for fences. Heck, we've even paid for herders, for sheep operators. We have another program that suits, I wouldn't say small ranches, but suits ranches that have a little bit more infrastructure already up front. And so it's just kind of picking and deciding which one is more beneficial for you. But that's really where we got started with all of this. Is a lot of these large Western ranches, they don't have the infrastructure. And so this is where those virtual fencing collars really became, enticing. Mm-hmm. People want to say, well, yeah, I would love to have 100 different paddocks, but I can't have the money to build 100 different pastures, But those virtual fencing collars, they allow you to do that. There's a ranch not far from here that we have, we're in a project with, and they're getting their cattle down. They have 800 head. They're getting down to, 3 to 4 acre paddocks, all being held in by virtual fencing.
Dang.
Yeah.
Have y'all tried that on like a crossbred cow or anything?
It works better.
Really?
Yeah.
It's just a shock collar, basically.
Yes. A friend of mine who works, John Locke, Hudgens Brahmins, they just collared a bunch of Brahmin cattle. And he said, when they first got them, they laid down and like ran around in a circle like crazy. But he goes, within, 48 hours, they had it completely figured out. Mm-hmm. And so I always think that crossbred cattle are a little bit smarter than English cattle. And so it doesn't really surprise me that it honestly works better on them.
Yeah. And it's Tucker Brown talked a little bit about it. So it's basically like a shock collar that beeps, and once they get close to the line, and then if they go over something, it shocks them.
Right. And there are different companies. There's Vince, Halter, Gallagher, and they all do slightly different things. Vince was probably one of the initial players. So the technology is a little kind of increased as we've gone on. Halter is pretty amazing. They have it set up to where it like beeps. Let's say the pasture is to the right of where the cattle are. It'll beep in the left side of the cattle to try to push them that direction. So the technology is incredible.
Yeah. So this like the 800 head, is that what you said, 800 head? Do they put collars on every one of these?
Yes, sir. Well, you don't put them on the calves and the bulls.
Yeah.
The bulls' necks are too big and the calves are growing.
Yeah.
So the virtual fencing.
But every cow,
yes,
like if you were going to do yearlings, you'd put it on every yearling, or?
The yearlings is harder just due to the fact that those yearlings are growing. That's why typically with our yearling operators, we use those GPS tags. And the reason why we're using virtual fencing and GPS tags, the true reason behind all that is it's twofold, but when we're actually verifying these credits, we want our credits to stand out above anybody else, all of our competition. And if we can actually prove where those cattle have been, then nobody's going to have any thought of, well, they're greenwashing us. We can prove that these rotations actually occurred. This isn't somebody's, writing chicken scratch down on a paper or through some app. We can prove where the cattle are. And then on top of that, we can look at what's going on when we test the soil. So if we can put those two things together, we really can come up with a recipe of, okay, what is the appropriate rest for this pasture? You don't want your grass to get rank on you because then your cattle performance will go down. Mm-hmm. And so managing that balance between animal performance and forage performance is extremely difficult, right? And that's what I said at the beginning of this. This is all art. And so if we can take away a little bit of that and put some more science behind this, that's our ultimate goal with what we're trying to achieve. And for the rancher, if we can increase our stocking rate, along with having that cattle performance, along with getting a carbon payment, why wouldn't you look into this?
Yeah. I mean, it seems to me like you're using very new world technology to try to almost get back to a long time ago, the 1800s or whatever, naturally how this country would have been. And then also you're able to sell, because people are wanting this, it sounds like you're able to sell it and profit off of it by selling this to large corporations. I've got a huge giveaway going on right now for business owners. I've got a brand new 24-foot flatbed trailer from Dax Trailer Sales, and I'm going to give it away to a new credit card processing account. You've heard me talk a lot about it before, so not only will you get the savings, the service, and the upgraded equipment that we offer, but now you're going to be entered to win this brand new flatbed trailer to help you in your business, or if you just want to haul around your personal toys on it. So if you're a business owner that's already taking credit and debit cards for payments, click the link below and let's see what we can do and get you entered to win this new trailer.
Yes, sir. Exactly. There's a demand for these carbon credits with large multinational corporations. So all we're doing is bridging the gap between what American ranchers are doing and what these large multinational corporations are wanting.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we get into, oh, well, this is liberal or this is that, yada, yada, yada. But at the end of the day, it's supply and demand, right? The large multinational corporations, they're demanding a carbon credit, and we as American ranchers can provide them with it.
Yeah.
So let's take advantage of it.
Yeah, I mean, you get into the views. It's almost like you hear, I've heard Rogan talk about it and other people, but like we push for all these regulations on companies over here on limiting pollution and all this stuff, and it's like, yes, we for sure need to do that, but it's not helping anything. All we did was drive all the companies to different countries where they're polluting 100 times worse. So how can we stay here, keep companies here to not only help the economy, but also control that pollution a little bit, or maybe offset it through this stuff or however it works, instead of just turning a blind eye to it and saying, no, you're not doing this at all.
Well, right as of now, it's all voluntary. So if a large corporation in the United States doesn't want to partake, they don't have to.
Mm-hmm.
And, it comes down to a lot of these companies, they have shareholders, and the shareholders, they've made their demands on what they want. And a lot of these companies, for example, Google comes out and says they're going to be carbon neutral by 2030. How are they going to do that? Well, they have to do that through carbon offsets. There's offsets and insets, and I can get into that. An offset is basically something that has nothing to do with your supply chain. So paying a rancher to do a better job with their grazing management really doesn't have anything to do with what Google's doing. But an inset would be, for example, if Amazon wants to reduce their emissions, maybe they switch over to a different way of delivering packages. So what we're focusing on is 100% offsets.
Yeah.
I think there is opportunity in the future for some more insetting to come in. There's a lot of interest in this for companies like McDonald's, Cargill. But the hard thing with insetting is traceability of beef in the United States of America. They want to make a claim, but this just as well as I do. I mean, you have no idea where the path those cattle had been on, once they get to the rail.
Mm-hmm.
And there are companies that are doing that. IMI Global with 44, they have traceability throughout the entire herd, but I don't foresee in the future us ever getting to that level in the United States of America, just because there's so many small producers and there's so many sale barns all across the United States.
Yeah, it's so split up, and I think, I don't know what would be better, but I'd almost think it's going to be better to keep it that way, and it's more freedom that way, I guess, maybe is how I'm thinking about it. And also, like, what I tell people is, like, if you're going to eat beef, go. I know so many people that sell beef, directly. It's like, I think that, they probably all do a really good job. And it's like, whoever's closest to you, maybe somebody, or maybe you have a relationship with the local processing plant, or, you're related to somebody that raises beef or something. Like, go support those people. Any of those small people, it's going to help, as opposed to, just buying everything at the grocery store that's comes from another state or another country or whatever it is. I'm completely for just like the small producer and supporting them. How can we make that work a little bit better?
Absolutely.
So who knows where it's all going to lead?
Well, sustainability is a huge thing with a lot of our large packers right now. There's a lot of eyes on the beef industry, and that's why I just think that if we can, as a whole industry, if we can try to do a better job with our grazing management, as Tucker Brown says, if we can try to do a better job of telling our story, we as ranchers, we love our animals just as much as anybody does, right? We're not out there to provide, harm anything. up to me, I want to be able to manage my grass and my stock better than anybody. And I feel like if somebody in New York City knew that, it would help us kind of bridge that gap.
Yeah. Yeah. We get so tied up in the, almost like the pollution thing. Like you just want to turn a blind eye to it because like you don't agree with these people or whatever, but the story's going to get told anyway. And if you're not a part of telling your own story, then no telling what's going to end up over here, what they're going to end up hearing. So, I mean, it's the same way in anything that's how rumors get started. You had nothing to do. Right. I see it all the time of somebody's like, I heard you did this or that. And I'm like, no, where did that come from? So, but if somebody's on social media or whatever, I know we can't all be on social media all the time, but if you can play some kind of part in getting the story out then and being in control of it, then there's a good chance it's going to be correct, or most of it's going to be correct.
Right. And that's what we're trying to do with Kateri with this verification is, we're verifying that these practices are actually occurring. This is a big issue when carbon credits started coming out was greenwashing, because there were claims made that weren't actually going on. And so the ability to actually verify the practices that are going on, I think that's what really allows us to sell our carbon credits at a different level than our competition.
And to kind of wrap up, I know I already asked you about the grazing and the regenerative resources, but just on our whole conversation, I think we covered a lot on getting started as a young person wanting to be involved in agriculture and ranching, getting into the regenerative, growing the grass, rotational, all that type of stuff, multi-species, plus the carbon ranching, the carbon credits. What are some good resources, books or something that would kind of cover all that, or maybe some one resource for each thing or whatever?
Some books I really liked. I like Thoughts and Advice by an old cattleman, from an old cattleman. I'm trying to think of the veterinarian that wrote that, but it's more or less a book on rotationally grazing stocker cattle and how to straighten out stocker cattle. I like anything Alan Nation has ever written. I don't know if you've read of any of his stuff. Land, Livestock, and Life, just kind of a different way of looking at ranching and the new generation of ranching. Soil Health Academy is great. Gay Brown's book, Dirt to Soil, is fantastic. But yeah, any Ranching for Profit is also a fantastic class, as is TCU Ranch Management. I think anybody that's wanting to get involved in agriculture that's young, don't turn a blind eye to anybody that's willing to help you. Take the knowledge anywhere you can get it and mold that knowledge to what's going to make you successful. Anybody, like I said before, don't think that you know everything, because as soon as you think you know it all, you will get humbled. And I by no means know it all. I'm learning things every day, and I make mistakes every day. But yeah, I mean, heck, just go sit in the sale barn, go to a Ranch for Profit class, go to Soil Health Academy, and try to blend all those things together.
Mm-hmm. And that was you covered it there. My next question would have been, I always ask everybody what would be your advice to somebody getting started. I think you covered it right there. You got to have the right mindset, got to learn. Anything else on that? Pretty much covered. Be
willing to partner with somebody that you feel like pushes your buttons, pushes you to the next limit. Be willing to partner with somebody that you feel has a greater knowledge than you in a specific area. That's why, I brought on Carl with the goats. He knows, 10 to 1 what I know about that. And he's always kind of pushing to the next level. And I think that's how we become successful. How we pick up new lease places is showing we're different than everybody else. I think that when you're going to leasing land, just showing up as, Mr. Day Worker Cowboy, that doesn't work with today's landowners. And I think that's just the reality of what we're dealing with. You have to be able to listen to them and provide them what they want.
Yeah. Solving problems, that's it's a sales deal almost. I think anybody needs to learn some sales, whether you have a direct sales role or not, because even in that's a sales role. You got to be able to communicate with these people. First of all, you got to market to them enough to get a conversation started. Then second of all, be able to talk to them, figure out what their goals, what their wants and needs, and whatever makes them happy. And then how can we both win? How can I get your place for as cheap as possible, for as long as possible, and run it how I want to run it, but also you're happy at the end of it. You think you got a hell of a deal. Both parties thinks they got a hell of a deal. That's exactly how, sales is. You're in sales that way, and you're in sales of selling the carbon credits also. So you probably know the importance of that.
Relationships are the biggest, to me, the most important factor in agriculture. And we get into agriculture not to have relationships and talk to people. And my personality is not that way at all. I'd prefer to be out with the cattle and the dogs and not have to talk to anybody, but you're not going to make it very far if that's the way you want to act.
Yeah. Not unless you happen to inherit a large chunk of land, right, and you don't in far West Texas, and you don't got to go to town, but that's not everybody. Okay, well, how can people get a hold of you, get a hold of your company and all that stuff? Yeah, well, check us out at Kateri Carbon, www.katericarbon.com. We're also on Facebook, and if you need to reach me, my name is Marshall Whorley, and I'm on Facebook as well. I'll be happy to help any way that I can. Yeah. I almost forgot to ask, what's your favorite restaurant? And all your world travels. There's not much. I don't know. I like Southside and Goldthwait. They serve a pretty good steak, and it's nice to have something close to home. Yeah. Really good burgers too. I don't know if I've had a steak there, but really good burgers. Really, and a cool atmosphere. It is cool. We like to take the kids, and they usually have like a band playing. You can let the kids go run around and play, and you actually can enjoy 10 minutes of your time. You're not having to deal with them. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you coming on. Yeah. I hope y'all like that. I hope you got something out of it. Lots of knowledge covered there. Like I said, y'all reach out to them if you think you qualify, or maybe you're more interested to know more in it or whatever, and share this episode out. If you didn't get anything out of it, maybe somebody else will. So we'll see y'all next time. A mastermind has the sole purpose of getting you further, faster, and that's exactly what we're doing with the Wealthy Cowboy Show Mastermind. It is for the person that's ready to start out building their business, or someone just looking to get their business to the next level. We will have live Q&A calls that you can ask past and future guests questions that relate specifically to you. You'll also hear ideas and be able to network with people that could open you up to a completely different way of thinking that could change your life. Click the link below if you're looking to go to the next level in business and in life.